Hi, I'm Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and I'm here today to show you a fantastic quilt to make using 10-inch pre-cut squares. And why is it so fantastic, you ask? Because every other block is made up of a circle fusible applique, and all you have to do for those is cut out the circles, fuse them in place, and your block is done. And the alternate blocks are your pre-cut 10-inch squares. So you can get started right away on putting this quilt together, and it's just a really fun quilt with the mixture of circles and squares. So let's get started on making this quilt. So to make the checkerboard quilt, you will need some additional yardage beyond your 10-inch squares. Your 10-inch squares will be used for the squares you see in the quilt, and then we'll be adding fusible web to half of them and cutting circles out. And you'll need a background fabric for the circles. So you want a tonal that will contrast with your 10-inch squares. And I've got this white on white tonal that will work great for what I'm doing. And I've got this fun collection of 10-inch squares in teals and corals and purples, and they'll just look really nice in these circles. If you need a pack of 10-inch squares, you can go to the Sit and Sew Fabrics website. There's all kinds of choices there, and when you purchase a pack, you can download this checkerboard pattern so you can make it. There's also plenty of other kits on the site, both quilt kits where all the pieces are already cut and you can just start sewing right away, and also pre-cut shapes, squares, strips, hexagons, that type of thing. So head over and check it out. So the last thing that you will need to make this quilt is fusible web. And you'll be cutting 21 circles from fusible web. And the half circle shape is on the back of the pattern. So you can trace it to make a full circle. And then you'll need to trace 21 of those on the fusible web. I've got one here to show you how it goes together. So I'm going to choose my first square to make a circle out of, and I'm going to lay it wrong side up on my ironing board, and I'm going to put my circle on the fusible web with the sticky side down, paper side up on top of that square, and press to adhere it. Now you can do these all at once, or you can make them one at a time, whatever you prefer. And once that is adhered to your fabric, I'll show you a little trick that I like to do. Sometimes I have trouble separating the paper from the fusible web, so before I cut it, what I do is I pull it back just past my cut line. And then I've got that loose edge that I can work with when it's time to pull the paper off the back. So I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut very carefully on this circle line. Stay as close to the line as I can. And like I said, we're going to be making 21 of these. So you can choose 21 squares from your fabric pack that you want to be the circles, and fuse a circle shape on fusible web to the wrong side of each, and then cut each of them out. Okay, so there's my circle, and I'm going to fuse it to the center of the square. So I'm also going to show you a trick so that you can make sure that your circle is as centered as possible on the square. So what I like to do, and I pull the paper off first because it's just a little easier to, there's my loose edge, it's a little easier to fold this without the paper on. So keep it away from your iron, but take the paper off and then fold it in half and just finger press out on the edges when it's folded in half, just so you can kind of see that real faint line. And then fold it in half in the other direction and finger press as well. Obviously you don't want to use the iron here because you've got fusible web on it, but you just need to be able to see that real faint crease, which you may not be able to see from the camera, but you'll see it on your own. And then take your square over to the ironing board and you're going to do the same thing over there. So for this, I'm just going to press across the entire square because it's just easier. I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. Okay. And so now when I go to position my circle on top, I can line up those creases. And I know that if I get all 4 of those lined up, then my circle is wonderfully centered on my background square. Then I'm going to press to adhere it in place. Okay. And then your next step is to add a decorative stitch to the edge of your circle, which will help hold your circles in place, especially if this is going to become a well-loved lap quilt. You can either use a zigzag stitch or a buttonhole, or you can even just do a straight stitch right along the edge of your circle, but just something that will help to secure those layers together as the quilt is loved and used for years. And after you've done your decorative stitch, the last step to finishing this is to square up the block. These background squares are cut a little big so that sometimes when you do the decorative stitch, it will pull on the fabric a bit. So this just gives us the opportunity to square it up. So we're going to square the block up to 10 inches square. And if you can see your crease lines from before, you can use those as a guide. And I like to cut 2 sides at a time. Oops, I didn't cut very well in that corner. And then flip it over. And cut the other 2 as well. All right, there's our finished square. So you're going to be making 21 of these circle squares with the background and the circle in the middle, a decorative stitch, and then trimming it down to size. And then you will take your 21 circle blocks and your 21 leftover squares and lay them out into 7 rows of 6 each. And you can see the blocks are actually, there's the same number of each in each row. It's just the top row is, the second row is rotated 180 degrees from the top row. So lay out all of your squares and blocks either on a design wall or on the carpet and get them in the order you like with your fabric spread out however you like. Then sew your blocks and squares into rows and join the rows to make your quilt top. Then you can layer your quilt top with your backing and batting and baste the layers together and quilt it however you'd like, add binding, and voila, your quilt is done. Possibly one of the easiest quilts you've ever made thanks to a little fusible applique. So if you need a pack of 10-inch squares to make this quilt, head over to the Sit and Sew Fabrics website. There's lots of choices there, and then don't forget to download the checkerboard pattern. And if you do make this quilt, I hope that you'll share a picture with us. We'd love to see it. You can do that either on the Sit and Sew Fabrics Facebook page, or you can tag us on Instagram. Happy sewing!